Welcome back to the Sporting Eyes show for the 27th of January. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for tuning in. We have a lot of news to get to, and for our starting point, I want to go up to Sydney. Obviously, Chad Warner is one of the biggest out-of-contract stars. I just want to go into some detail about what's going on with his situation. Now, your tone and answers to the media in the AFL do matter a lot. I'm going to use the Bailey Smith as an example with Luke Beveridge. He was asked about him last year. Where does the situation lie? Do you think he will stay? And if you go back and look at some of Luke Beveridge's answers, he was pretty low tone and clearly not that confident. And lo and behold, Bailey Smith is now at Geelong. Compare this a couple days ago. Jai Simpkin was on radio. He was on SEN talking about Luke Davies-Uniacke, one of the biggest free agents this year as well. And he was really confident, said he's a good friend of his, that he loves the group and he's pretty sure he'll stay. So from that, I'm taking that Luke Davies-Uniacke will stay at North Melbourne. But I just want to compare to what Errol Goulden, star teammate of Chad Warner, said about his situation a few days ago. So Errol Goulden said, "I'm certainly doing my best, but it's Chad's decision. I'll be niggling away at him throughout the year. Don't worry about that. I love playing with him. He's one of my best mates. I just want to see him be happy. At least he's got a pretty nice pad now too." To me, his answers were not that reassuring. He was kind of joking a little bit. And I don't think he's full of confidence that Chad Warner will be staying. And when he's referring to the pad, well, the big news is that, was it a couple months ago, Chad Warner and his partner bought a new house in Applegate in Western Australia, which is about 15 to 17 minutes away from West Coast headquarters and Fremantle headquarters. And that's interesting in itself. Now, to me, looking from the outside, when I'm hearing that Chad Warner's playing golf with Don Pike, the West Coast CEO, and Kieran Jack, former Sydney player, who's now at West Coast, I think he's just about out of Sydney. I think he'll play pretty good this year and he'll request a trade out. So West Coast, and I think it will be to West Coast. Now, West Coast have 2 first-round picks, their own and Hawthorn's. Now, you could argue, well, why wouldn't he want to go to Fremantle? They're probably closer to a premiership, but I think from Fremantle's perspective, they already have Hayden Young, Sarong, Brayshaw, Matt Johnson and Neil Erasmus as a couple other younger on-ballers. And I think they probably want Cozzy Pickett to bolster their forward line. So it leaves West Coast, who have the resources to get Chad Warner in free rein. So it's interesting. Sydney, if there's a club that could afford to lose a star player like Warner, it would be the Swans. We know they can bounce back from these types of situations, but it does hurt them. Warner's a star. He's one of the best goal-kicking midfielders. He's coming into his prime. He really hasn't hit it, and he was All-Australian last year. But those comments from Errol Goulden were interesting to me. I think when we compare it to some other situations, it's not a great sign, so it will be an interesting topic to follow in 2025, the form of Chad Warner and how Sydney go. Now, we're going to move on to another star of the competition. He's a few years younger than Chad Warner, and that's Nick Watson. Now, he made the highlights for a spectacular market training. So I'm going to show it, and I'm going to show the Sam Durham one as well, and we'll discuss which one was better.
Oh my God! He's got it.
Now, they're both fantastic. I actually think Durham's was underrated. Saw it about a week ago, and not many people talked about it compared to the Nick Watson one. But if I had to pick which one was better, I have to pick Nick Watson. And for me, it's the basketball dunk type of thing. If you have a guy who's 6 foot who dunks, compared to a guy who's 7 foot who dunks, which one normally looks better? It's normally the smaller player. They get more elevation and can normally slam the ball a little bit harder. And I think we can apply that with Nick Watson here. He gets up with a forward Seamus Mitchell, puts him on a poster and takes the one-handed mark. And we'll be seeing this for a long time and probably during the 2025 season as well. But I want to stick with Nick Watson. He's been making headlines besides this as well, just for his training, his improvement, apparently playing a little bit higher up the ground. But I want to put a pause on that, because I think Nick Watson can be one of the best offensive forward half weapons we've seen for a long time. I think he could be a better version of Tom Papley. Now, I was listening to SEN and Kane Corns and some other people as well were talking about he should try and move higher up the ground onto a kind of on-ball role and more like a Boomer Harvey type. But the way Nick Watson finished the year, it was scary. 13 goals in his final 4 games, 7 goals in the 2 finals. He destroyed my Western Bulldogs. Poor old Taylor Duray, no answers. Lockie Bramble, former Hawthorn player, couldn't deal with him, couldn't contain him. And then I think he was even better in the semi-final against Port Adelaide. They had Miles Bergman played on him a lot. Big kid, big, strong, powerful. And Watson made him look like a fool at times just with his pace. And I think that's what the Wizard was born to do. He was born to be a small forward, but he's better than a traditional small forward to me. He's just a weapon. He's so athletic. He can jump. He can run. He's got a pretty good engine for that position. And he finished the year so strong. And can he kick kind of 35, 40 plus goals this year? Sure he can. Just needs to make sure his accuracy is fine. And I think it will be. But I think we should put a pause on this kind of midfield time. Maybe a 10 to centre bounce here and there. But I think Nick Watson was born to be a forward half player, cause damage. And if you put him on ball, I think you're giving the defenders a rest. Go ask Miles Bergman and Taylor Duray if they would prefer Watson in the midfield or buzzing around in the forward line. Because I think we all know what the answer to that question is. He likes the moment. I think he's got some clutch gene in him. He loves taking big moments on, kicking big goals as he did in those finals. So he's a star, and I think Sam Mitchell will keep him permanently forward in the 2025 season and for a bit longer, because I think that's where he does his most damage, and it always causes the opposition problems when you have a guy with his skill and his football IQ in the forward line. But up next is 4 of the best. We're going to have a look at the win totals for a few teams and try to pick if they go over or under. It's now time for 4 of the best. So the way this will work in the home and away season is I'll pick 4 games each of the rounds and try to use the line to predict a winner. So, for example, Carlton versus Richmond in round 1. Carlton's favoured by 17.5 points. If they win by 18 or more, they cover. And if Richmond lose by 17 or less, then they cover. Now, we can't do this because there's no games on, obviously. But we can do it with the total for the wins of each of the clubs. So I've picked 4, and we're going to have a look at them. The first is West Coast, and their win over under is set at 5.5, and I've got the over for the Eagles. Great home ground advantage at Optus Oval. They get a bunch of fans, 40 plus thousand most weeks. And with Andrew McQualter coming in, I think they'll get spike improvement across the board. And I think some of their senior players will have better campaigns under a new coach. They do lose Tom Barrass and Jack Darling, but I really like Liam Baker, Jack Graham as some premiership experience from Richmond. And then you throw in Matt Owies, who's an above average small forward. I really like the West Coast Eagles to win 7 or 8 games in 2025. For an under, I've got the Sydney Swans. There's a few reasons why. When they really struggled last year was when Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner and Errol Goulden, either all 3 of them didn't play well or 2 of them didn't play well. And I'm just not sure all 3 of them will have the seasons they had last year. And with the speculation around Warner, that might affect him. Throw in Dean Cox coming in. I think it'll be pretty much more of the same. I'm not sure there'll be spike improvement like there might be at West Coast. And Sydney didn't really add a lot of players. They drafted 4 or 5, but no significant additions to a team that still has problems up forward and with another key defender. I still think Sydney will be good, but I think they're more likely to get 13 or 14 wins than getting above that 15 mark. Now, I cannot believe the win total for the Brisbane Lions is just 14.5, the same as Sydney's. I've got them at the low end getting 15 wins, if not 17 or 18. Again, great home ground advantage. They get Gardner back, McCarthy and Coleman, so there's competition for spots. Throw in Will Ashcroft's brother and Levi. Yet there's just so much competition to get into this team. Now, I think the reason this win marker is set low is because Joe Danaher, but with his absence, I think we'll just see better play from Rayner, Bailey and Charlie Cameron, all their small forwards, dynamic forward half players. This team's got a bunch of young guys still, but most of their players are right in their prime, even the older guys like Lachie Neale and Dane Zorko. So I can't believe Brisbane's win total was 14.5. I think they'll go well over that mark. And the last one for the under is Essendon, whose win marker is set at 9.5, which is low. I think Essendon's heading in the right direction, but I think they'll come back well within the pack this year, and I don't think they'll be challenging for top 8 at all. I think it's one step back to go 10 steps forwards. I think that's the way Brad Scott and Essendon are looking at this year. I think they'll play more young players. Right now, as I'm speaking, they're the 4th youngest list, and they're in the bottom half for total games experience, because they do lose Dyson Heppel and Jake Kelly from defence. I think they'll play Archie Roberts more. They'll give Elijah Sitsas a go, Ben Hobbs, Alwyn Davey, although he just got hurt. I just think they're going to experiment more, put more guys through the midfield with Jai Caldwell, Sam Durham, who I think they'll hope will keep improving. Again, they've got some troubles forward of the ball. We know Nate Caddy's a great young player, but I'm not sure about Peter Wright and his contest work. So I think it could be a bit of a down year for Essendon, more likely to get 7 or 8 wins, but that is a low marker, 9.5 wins. So I think people might think they get to 10-11 again, but I'm going to go slightly under for Essendon. But up next, we're going to have a look at North Melbourne's new captain, or newish captain, and then we're going to have a look at West Coast and a few of their injury concerns, mainly with Elliot Yeo. So I was a bit disappointed last week when it was announced Jai Simpkin would be captain of North Melbourne. Now, he isn't a new captain. He's captained them for the last couple of years, but he is new into the sole leadership position because he was co-captain with Luke McDonald, who decided to stand down, which was no surprise. He had been struggling for form. When it looked like 3 or 4 years ago he would be one of the better small, medium defenders, for whatever reason it hasn't worked out, and his form has really tapered off the past couple of years especially. But with AFL captains, I like to play a game where I ask myself, who is the captain of this club? And I just flick out a name. So, who is the captain of the Western Bulldogs? Marcus Bonampelli. That's your first thought. Who is the captain of Essendon? Zach Merritt. Who is the captain of Carlton? Patrick Cripps. It's whoever your first thought is, normally is the captain. That's not the case with North Melbourne. When I ask that question to myself, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will have the same answer, who is the captain of North Melbourne? The first name that comes to mind for me is Harry Sheezel. Now, he is vice-captain, but I really thought he was a big shot at being the sole captain, despite being really young in his age, just 20 because he has that late birthday. Now, Simpkin in charge has a record of 6 wins and 40 losses as the past 2 years as captain. Is that his fault? Not really, but he is the captain and you have to take some responsibility for that, although he hasn't played in all those games, to be fair. Simpkin's a nice guy, always speaks well, enjoy listening to him speak, especially on radio and a few interviews, but is he dynamic? Is he inspirational? Is he charismatic? I'm not sure, and I think although the players voted for him, I reckon deep down that they know Sheezel will be captain in the future, and they're just delaying the process for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want the pressure on him, but I think sometimes it's good to have a really young leader at the helm to give some inspiration. Now, the reason I wasn't that happy with Simpkin is a couple of years ago, there was a mic'd up Fox Footy program with Zach Merritt and Jai Simpkin when Essendon played North Melbourne. So just type it up on YouTube. You'll be able to find it pretty easy. And tell me if Jai Simpkin is really a captain that would inspire you and get you hyped up and ready for a game, because there's just no way. It did nothing for me. And when you compare him with Zach Merritt, it was just on a totally different level. So, but the interesting part of it is that the players did vote for this. So maybe the training standards that Simpkin has is really high, and the players kind of are inspired by him. But I'm shocked it wasn't Harry Sheezel, because I think we all know it will be in the future. He was on Dwayne Russell's program on SEN last year and admitted that he did want the captaincy. So I'm not sure how much longer Jai Simpkin will have it. He's still a young man himself. He's only 26. But I feel like North Melbourne is just delaying this inevitable switch that will happen soon enough. And I was a bit disappointed in it, and I'm not sure why they're delaying the inevitable. Now, another team that struggled last year I want to get to is West Coast. And to finish off, they had a big injury blow with Elliot Yeo. Now, at the time of recording this, I'm not sure what the results of his scan on the knee are, but hopefully they're positive, because if he's out, it's a really, really big blow, because I do have some high hopes for West Coast that they can move up a couple spots on the ladder and get a couple more wins. Yeo had his best year in 5 years last year in terms of player rating. He won the best on ground in one of the derbies, although Harley Reid was probably a bit unlucky. But he's tough, he's strong, not athletic as he once was, but he's a big body that Andrew McQualter needs. And if he's out, then it's a big blow to them. Because a lot of the reports out of West Coast is there's a bit more energy. They're going to play fast-paced, quick, just like Richmond under Damien Hardwick, where McQualter, I'm guessing, has got a lot of his coaching influence from. So not good news for West Coast. I have high hopes for them. And they also announced their captaincy, just as a last point, with Allen and Duggan, which I'm fine with. Co-captaincies can be a bit weird, but if we play that game I just did with Shizu, who is the captain of West Coast, I don't really have a great answer. So I guess co-captain is the best thing they could come up with until they can get a really good and solid captain that they can make the sole one in the future. Thanks for watching the Sporting Eyes show on this Monday afternoon. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back on Thursday.